We are not using a mic, so we're just going to do our best to project, and I think our panelists are very good at that. I'm just going to do a quick intro. So first of all, we don't have a slide deck, but we do have some handouts. So I'm going to do like a take one and pass them along in a second, so just be prepared for those. And just as a backstory, my name is Caitlin, and I work at Breach Collective, which is a nonprofit based in Eugene and Portland. And we build power in the climate and labor movements. And one of the organizations represented on this panel, Memphis Community Against Pollution, was one of our very first partners in 2020. Yeah. And we worked closely with them to successfully beat the Byhalia pipeline. So that was a really exciting time. We were a really new organization. I don't know if MCAP was even like technically an organization.
No, that was not. It was a neighborhood club.
So we've come a long way separately, and we've remained really close, and we continue to work together. And MCAP and other partners that you'll meet today are now fighting a data center owned by Elon Musk in Memphis.
There we go.
And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and take it away, and I hope you're ready to dive deep on this evil data center. And yeah, just take one of these and pass them along.
You got it.
All right, I'll go first. My name is Keyshawn Pearson. I'm the president of Memphis Community Against Pollution. As Caitlin mentioned, we've been partners with folks in Oregon for a long time, but this is my first time making it out to Oregon, and so thank you to Breach Collective, and thank you to Caitlin and Nick and Danny. They actually showed us what being an organization really looked like, and so fortunate to have them as family and friends, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. But I am the firstborn to teenage parents who are now Dr. Kimberly Owens Pearson, and we have my dad is Reverend Jason C. Pearson Sr. These folks had us at 14 and 15 years old, and really committed their lives into instilling in us the values that we need to be successful, but also to care for our community. And so, like a lot of black families, it started with the church, and now we have church everywhere. And so it is a gift to be able to do this work. And I tell people it's bittersweet because, you know, I lost both of my grandmothers to cancers in their early 60s because they lived in 38109. And now the work I do is to protect families in the future from experiencing the same things that I've felt. And so it is a gift to be here alongside my colleagues, Latricia and Sarah. But we also have MCAP staff here, our whole team. We have Kimberly, we have Kimberly Davis, and we have Christine. And they make MCAP what it really looks like. I'm good at talking. Everything else, these folks make sure it happens. And so I'm so grateful for them for being here. And let's see. I think that's pretty much it. I love my family. One of my brothers is pretty popular. Has an afro. His name is Representative Justin J. Pearson. Yeah. And so he's my younger brother. He used to be my baby brother until we had another baby. And so it's 5 of us in total. And I did, want to just share with y'all that, we did lose my brother, Temperance Darnell Pearson Sr., December 1st of last year. And so it's been a difficult time for my family. And we received so much support from so many different people that's allowed us to kind of navigate that space. And Breach Collective and Protect Our Aquifer and Young Gifted and Green and all the folks around me that you see are a lot more than just people that I work with. They are the people that continue to help us inside the work and outside in our lives. And so this is what community really looks like and feels like. And so just wanted to share that with y'all. And thank y'all again for choosing to show up here.
Oh man, I didn't think you were going like straight to the emotional stuff, man. Yeah, so Keyshawn, I'm Sarah Houston. I serve as the Executive Director of Protect Our Aquifer. We are based in Memphis. Yes, we actually got to know MCAP pretty much in our infancy too, through the Byhalia pipeline fight. That crude oil pipeline was trying to go through a drinking water well field in Boxtown in a 99% black neighborhood. And so we came at it from a, like, you know, very much protect the water standpoint. Like, what are the permits we need to deal with, all this? And then we were like, whoa, people power is pretty cool too. So it was a very interesting growth for my, like, at the time, very, very white, very older Midtown, which is like cute little nook of Memphis, but it's a nook. And so it was a big moment for our organization to understand, like, really what does power building look like, what does movement look like, and what does partnership really look like in this work for us to protect our drinking water supply. And so at that time we were all volunteer, board run, and Byhalia Pipeline was kind of the like moment to get us thinking about, we need to make this bigger, more sustainable, because there's a lot of work to do. I am a kind of a water nerd generalist, I guess you could say. I think water is the most fascinating and amazing thing that we have, and we all need it for survival.
That's right.
And I know that this area of the world knows that very well. Memphis, Tennessee is actually atop an amazing aquifer system. It's about 2 layers down. There's this huge sandy formation, 800 feet thick, with 2,000-year-old pristine drinking water. It's extremely unique. It touches parts of 8 states, but Memphis, Tennessee is the biggest user of this. 150 to 200 million gallons a day is pumped from this aquifer. And it's a very slow moving, it hasn't really had any management needs, there hasn't been any major contamination issues, and then we got started because there was this threat. Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, our big energy producer out in that part of the world, and they had a big coal plant. And they had coal ash pond, unlined, they were just dumping all their fly ash in there. Arsenic, lead, fluoride, all the nasty stuff is sinking into the groundwater. Well, they decided to build their new combined cycle frac gas plant right across the street, and they needed a water source for that, and instead of using the Mississippi River, which is literally right there, they decided to use the aquifer. And they sink 5 deep wells across from this unlined coal ash pond. And local Sierra Club caught wind of this. They tried to sue, but they didn't have local standing, being technically based in California. So that's when POA was founded, to just join this lawsuit, stop the wells, protect the aquifer, job's done, right? Well, we learned a lot through that. But we did get the wells stopped, and they are no longer using those, so that was my first win. But yeah, this aquifer is just, it's out of sight, out of mind. And our organization's charge is to ensure that there's clean drinking water access for all of Memphis and really the West Tennessee. But as you know, that there's a lot of historical legacy pollution, a lot of environmental racism that we'll get into. That has been a huge part of how we are directing our focus and our understanding of the work that we have ahead. So yeah, water is life, and that's what we're here to keep doing. So.
Hey y'all, I'll try to be brief because I want to get into this conversation, but my name is Latricia Adams. I'm actually a proud native of Memphis, Tennessee. However, my journey into the environmental justice movement actually started with the Flint water crisis. So now, over almost 11 years ago, isn't that crazy? It'll be 11 years in April. At the time, I actually lived in DC, so that was really important as it related to the Hill. And so I was outraged about what was going on in Flint and felt like there weren't a lot of civil rights organizations that really were supporting the way that they should have. At that time, I was serving, I think as vice president at that time, of Thursday Network with the Greater Washington Urban League, which is an affiliate of the National Urban League. And in millennial fashion, even though we were the youngest at that point, I was like, I'm just going to do something on my own. So essentially we responded like many people did in the beginning of that crisis, where there were numerous like donation drives, but we knew that that wasn't going to get to the systemic issue that caused the Flint water crisis to happen. But even more than that, that was just a little piece of a bit of a huge issue across the entire country, including in our nation's capital, including in my hometown. And so we grew very quickly. My background actually is in K through 12 and my student loans. My career was being an educator. I was a middle school teacher, high school teacher, very short time was a principal. That was in my ministry. But because of that, I saw community in a very unique way and have consistently made that connection really at the core around our children. And so a pivotal moment for us is maybe like 2 weeks after we had done a service trip in Flint, Michigan. We brought youth with us as a service trip. 2 weeks after that, those same children received notices from their school that there was lead in their school drinking water. So I was already mad about what's happening in Flint, Michigan, to see that this happening in our nation's capital. And so we got a bill passed making it mandatory for testing in school drinking water, and we've been able to replicate that in different places throughout the country, including my home state, where we got a bill passed. It's not as cute as the one in D.C. Tennessee is still Tennessee. Memphis is its own state.
Come on.
But we also realized that the work around environmental justice has to be all-encompassing. So while lead is really our niche, we are very inclusive of environmental justice because I have another side of my work around government, right? So I used to be a government employee. I very much so deeply understand intergovernmental relations. So what that means is because I worked for almost 2 decades, even though I'm 25,
Come on, talk to him.
I understand how government works, right? So a lot of the things that they tell community about what you can and cannot do, I understand the inner workings of government and how we can mobilize community and use that intel to really push back on the things that they try to dump on our community, bringing it back home to Memphis. Being able to have a national platform around environmental policy really is important to really connect it to the ground. And so working with these two organizations and these two phenomenal leaders gives me an opportunity to use that leverage. I will also be remiss not to say that I was the youngest Black woman that served in the previous administration with the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And so I definitely brought community all the time into that space where I did my job. It does hurt, that we are in the space that we are in, but I will carry that to be a true representation of, I was a teacher, I was proud of a teacher, to be a teacher, but to see how you can use your power, the people power, to make change, not just for your own community, but have the power to change the whole country. So I'm excited to get into this conversation.
Okay, so where do you start with a conversation like this, where it's so much energy concentrated around an individual who is truly challenging how we live, how we operate in a democracy, and then what our future is going to look like every single day. And so it's going to be challenging to start, but I'll give you a little bit of historical context for framing. Where I'm from, 38109, Memphis, Tennessee. Big Memphis all day.
Big Memphis.
We've been there for generations, my family. And as I mentioned before, we lost a lot of folks to cancer. We have a cancer rate that is 4 times the national average, and in some areas 15 times. There is literally a street you can walk down, and everybody on the street has somebody who is either has cancer now or has died from cancer in the recent memory. And so we have historically dealt with burdens, and they look like the Tennessee Valley Authority and the coal ash that they've been pumping into our air and into our lungs. Sterilization Services of Tennessee was in 38109 since the 1970s. And thanks to the work of MCAP and our partners, they got evicted in April 30th of last year. So now that they're gone, our air is a little bit cleaner. But where we live has historically been a target. And I think it's something to be talked about where folks are seen as less than people and they are regulated to a specific area. So it's not by happenstance, right, that a majority black community is right there next to all of the industry in the city, or most of it. That's due to redlining. It's a direct correlation, direct effect. If you overlap the maps, you can see just how intentional it was really to coalesce these folks in a sacrifice zone. As Mustafa Santiago Ali calls them, it's where our lives have a different value than the people who are 7 miles away in the suburbia who live 10 years longer. We got the lowest life expectancy in 38109 in a particular neighborhood called Mallory Heights. And so it is the repetitive nature and the perpetual cycle that we want to break, right? That's the ultimate goal of Memphis Community Against Pollution. And we seek that out in different ways. And it only works when you build a coalition of partners and people to do that work. And so the frustration in my heart, the frustration in my community is not that it's this balding billionaire who's like trying to take over everything. The issue that we have with the xAI facility, its ownership, is that they choose and they've chosen Southwest Memphis because they do believe, as a pipeline company once said, and they didn't make it.
They didn't make it.
But they once said that we were the path of least resistance. And
Their PR person said that to the news kind of on accident.
right.
And it was like, oh yeah? Oh yeah? And that became like the rallying cry. It was pretty epic.
That's facts. And that's truly been what we've said for years and years and years about black people, about black families, about people who have been pushed to the side and forgotten about the people who are exploited, is that they aren't the path of least resistance. We are the path of resilience. And just like we showed them, we'll show you, right? It don't matter who you are. And so that's where the frustration is rooted, in the fact that this is perpetual, right? This continues to happen. This continues to happen to us specifically. The same Davis well field that was under threat from a pipeline and crude oil is the same Davis well field where xAI is pulling up their water. Like this isn't by happenstance in no way. And these are just years apart, right? The sterilization service of Tennessee facility that's been pushing out ethylene oxide, killing our community with cancer. They got evicted April 30th. We got the announcement for Elon Musk on June 5th. This is perpetual. And so, that is what we need to stop. Like, that's the root of it, is that we have to stop perpetually using and destroying these same communities, these same families. We have to figure out a different way of doing things. And so I'll give you all a timeline, and I'll start it, and then I'll turn it over to Latricia. And so basically, as we have learned, sometime in 2023, there was a meeting that was had between our Memphis Chamber of Commerce, our president of our utility services, Doug McGowan, and Elon Musk, right? They had a conversation about xAI bringing this facility to Memphis, and apparently it worked. And so they executed the sale and everything in March. Now, I just said in June, we got notification. And so we got notification along with our city council, along with our county commission, along with every other democratically involved elected, including my brother, Representative Justin J. Pearson, on the news.
In his district.
In his district, right? On the news. That's how we all found out. And it was months after it already had been executed. There's nothing about that is right. There's nothing about that is democratic. There is nothing about that that is actually beneficial to the way we do things. And it's actually an obvious erosion. Obvious. because if I were to try to open a lemonade stand, I would have to go through the land use control board meetings and the city council, and I would have to get so many different approvals. But this person is exempt from that. And so I think that is where government should really play a role. And so Latricia, our intergovernmental specialist.
Yeah, so that's a perfect segue. So first of all, it was absolutely demoralizing. We were actually together when the press conference happened. We actually were meeting with our leadership, with our mayor, the day that this press conference happened, and it just was completely, just heart-wrenching, upsetting to say the least. To hear just the absolute disrespect to democracy. So to kind of bring this home, it's a few things that I want to capture. So one is the complete absence of a democratic process that Keyshawn alluded to. And then the second part is around loopholes with our local code. So specifically with the Land Use Control Board. And then the third part is to go a little bit deeper into the regulatory aspect of this, because they are, 18 now, and it might be growing. Who knows, because there's no transparency from an air permitting perspective.
That's right.
So I'll first start with the democratic process, or the lack thereof. So it is completely asinine and sets a dangerous precedent that there is an entity that can set up shop that had no public comment, that did not have the proceedings to have an elected body to vote it up or down. The rationale about why, and trust and believe, immediately that same day, we emailed the staff that is responsible for the management of the Land Use Control Board to say, what type of permit did they get? How is this even possible? So they had I always mess this up.
Use by right.
Use by right permit. So essentially, because where they set up shop was already an establishment, so it was already a building. You could actually Google where Elon did an interview, and he talked about why he chose Memphis. We know he chose it because it's cheap land. 2, because he had access to this water. But then 3, you had this building, right? So because the building was already established, there's a loophole in code where they literally didn't have to go through the traditional process. So because that building had already gone through this land use control process with their predecessor, who also was very predatory, Electrolux is who existed before that. This is also a problem. So with Electrolux, essentially they got all of these tax credits, all of these broken promises that our local government did not hold them accountable to, and they went bankrupt. And they left with no accountability, right? And so to think that you have another entity that's a complete capitalist, to say the least, to do something similar is just insidious. And so because it's that loop, right, that loophole with land use, we had no access to a democratic process. So that means that community and our electeds didn't even have an opportunity to have a no-go decision.
That's right.
It was forced upon everybody, right? So that's one part. The second part of this that I want to talk about is around the regulatory aspect. So from a regulatory perspective, because this is unprecedented, that's the favorite word to use to say this, because it's unprecedented, right? I'm sick of it.
I need precedented.
So essentially, with these 18 gas turbines, so that was the next thing that we came out blazing about, is where the air permits. You mean to tell me that you have active turbines that's completely rogue? There's no type of oversight. And so there was a community meeting that Memphis Light, Gas, and Water held, I'm thinking timeline, was it in August? All right, around August of 2024. And so they were the only entity there, besides the mayor just made one quick appearance to say, this is really good for our city, and then, deuced out, and then just left this utility, director kind of by himself. And so I happened to do an interview, and I just made it plain. I said, where's the health department? Where's the health department? You literally have turbines that are in complete operation, and you didn't do your job as the local regulator. You get air permits locally, right? And like you just didn't do anything with that. Before this even went into place, there should have been an assessment about what the permitting process looked like, right? So it gets a little bit worse. So we had reached out to land use. Land use immediately was just like, you got to talk to the health department. Our health department is the most dismissive, even if that, they're very non-responsive. But until I said it on the news, right, where I said, where's the health department?
Right.
You can go and look and see the date where the Shelby County Health Department reached out to EPA in August. Because when did the meeting happen?
Yeah.
In August, and asked for guidance with EPA. Why didn't you do that in March?
Right.
Why didn't you do that before you actually allowed this entity to set up shop? Now, what makes this even worse is because this is unprecedented, EPA says that they don't even have the guidance to provide to this local
Right.
air permitter, right, to tell them how to set up this permit. So what happens with the people in the interim where this is completely rogue? We don't even know the levels of damage from an air perspective that's happening. Also keep in mind, this is a community that's already inundated with pollution, right? They're already in unattainment. So now you're stacking on like all of these various pollution issues. To this day, we still do not have an air permit. We still don't even know what is being emitted, right? So not just the pollution itself, but we don't even know what it is, right? The third layer of this is around this truly being such a bad deal.
Come on.
So,
about
one, we don't want to mark this as being that like, oh, like we're anti like bringing like good opportunities into community,
Right.
but you don't get to dictate who says that it's good.
That's right.
So there was a complete absence of engagement with community about what they feel are benefits. So one of the big things that we worked on, and I have no qualms to talk about this, when I served on WEJAC, is community benefits agreements. We fought to the bloody death, right? To make sure that community voice was authentic, right?
Right.
So not just doing a checkbox to talk to community, but there being a mutual agreement, one, where community is defining what those benefits are, but there also being a contract, an agreement about you meeting those needs, because Electrolux, we don't want that again. Where you set up shop, you get your tax incentives, you become millionaires, and then you peace out. So we're completely devoid of that. But then the other part that is really important about this is because you now have private sector, we don't have access to do public records requests. So for example, when you ask specific questions about what's even happening at xAI, even our city council like can't disclose to their constituents about certain aspects of this project because they had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. That is such dangerous territory. So especially when you start to think about like what's happening with water, what's even happening with the electricity grid, right? Because we didn't tap into that yet. What's happening with air quality? If we wanted to request information, how? Because this is private sector, even though you're using taxpayer resources. So this really sets a really dangerous precedent, not just for Memphis, but we see data centers that are popping up all across the country, right? And so it's just so unfortunate that these people who are not elected, Memphis Chamber of Commerce, that put themselves in a position where they prioritize capitalism and white supremacy over the greater good of this community. And trust and believe, we must continue to fight to ensure that this will never happen again. So that means that we have to go back into figuring out where did those loopholes happen. If we have to go back to really resist to say, can they legally really do this? We're going to do that because we're not going to allow an elected official, a man from South Africa, to dictate what is a benefit in Memphis.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, I'm done.
You can tell we have like fun together while we also are like constantly on.
Constantly.
But yeah, you know, so I'm gonna kind of talk about the water side, but also like the fact-finding side. Like we're like as an organization trying to like grow into this like technical allyship lane. You know, like my second hire ever was a science director. I was like, we need to make sure, especially as an aquifer, it's really hard to like understand all the data and the details and stuff. It's like we always want to be science-based, but know that like that's just driving the conversation. That isn't the conversation. And so, you know, on the fact-finding stuff, she kind of talked about about the energy and the water need. And so that's one of the big things with these data centers. You know, they are very demanding of energy and they're very demanding of water. And almost water in two ways, because you water the water footprint within the energy generation, which is its own thing, and then the water footprint if they're using these water cooled systems. And that's what we have in Memphis. We have these data center that is water cooled. Smaller ones, from our understanding, sometimes are air cooled, and they've got these big kind of vents, and they're really loud and noisy. And those are usually goes into like industrial parks, where they become a public nuisance if they are these big, loud, noisy air things. Well, we've got this water cooled system, which is super efficient, innovative, blah blah blah. Okay, how much water are we talking about? And so one of the things in Memphis, so this aquifer is like a huge point of pride. It's like super good water, and Memphis is like
the best.
Whatever
Best
good thing we
The
got, we
best.
gotta rep this really hard. And so like there's a lot of personal pride around our aquifer, which is like really just a cool foundation to have. You know, like it's just a great starting point. It's like one thing everybody agrees on is like good, clean water. So like don't you mess up our freaking water, right? That's a good like, okay, let's get this going. So we need, if you want to drill a well in Shelby County in Memphis, Tennessee, you need a permit. It's the only county in the entire state of Tennessee that has that rule. You can literally just poke holes, drill, pump, whatever you want to do. You can still pump however much you want, but you have to at least fill a permit to like drill the well. So we got some like bare bones we're working from. But you know, because of a lot of like pre-advocacy and education around this issue, you know, our electeds and our leadership and our utility director like knows we're going to fight tooth and nail every industry that's trying to tap into our aquifer with a private well for free pure water. And like that day and age is over. And especially if we're talking about data centers, why do you need clean, potable drinking water supply for a cooling system?
You don't.
No. So that's something where we're constantly trying to look at where are those types of industries, with data centers being a prime example, where you could have an alternative water source. And so that like general idea and message is something we've kind of put out there. But one of the things that's like a huge piece of like, this is kind of the silver lining part of this chaos moment that we're in. So, you know, TVA, we talked about the wells they drill, the water they need. So they're relying on Davis Wellfield for their water. Still the aquifer, but it's a few miles away. It's not drawing down the arsenic at the same rate as if they were across the street.
That's right.
But it's been a long time campaign, pretty much since POA started, day one, 2017, was like, we need to get TVA off the aquifer. They are literally across the street from the city's municipal wastewater system. So this is where that little handout you have, I'm gonna get into map mode real quick, and bear with me. So what you see here, yeah, everybody. So what you see here, TVA, there's our big, if you don't share with anybody. Anybody need some?
Oh, oops, sorry.
It's not, you're not going to be selling anything too exciting. So what you have here is you've got TVA, big, huge, like I said, frac gas plant. Right across the street, you see this TE Max, and that's the wastewater treatment plant. This treats 70 million gallons of our wastewater a day. A lot of water that's getting treated, and then it flows in the Mississippi River, never to be seen by our community again. So for a long time, we have been advocating that TVA get off of our aquifer, but also off of the drinking water infrastructure that South Memphis relies on, because then we start to compete between generating electricity or having water for survival. And that's kind of a thing that we had like talked about for a while. Then in December of 2022, we had this massive, cold freeze snap. We ended up having rolling blackouts. It was like a really intense moment. It was like literally Christmas 2022. Yep. It was like boil water notices. Folks weren't getting water to their house. Like energy, folks' lights were going on and off. Like it was like literally a like humanitarian crisis happening. And it was like our worst case scenario. It's like, this is what we've been talking about when you have your energy generation relying on your drinking water infrastructure. And then once the rolling blackouts ended, we were still in like a voluntary conservation mode. But MLGW, our utility, had to say, hey, TVA, can you scale back water? Because we need to start pushing this out to the residents. And so it's like, so in 2023, we started up our campaign again. We're like, hey, we really need to push on TVA getting off the aquifer because this is not, like, this is dangerous. And we focused on our MLGW board because we're pretty much asking them to lose their largest water customer. We're asking them to, like, you know, forfeit $2 to $3 million of revenue a year, but for the sake of your infrastructure and the public. And so we ran that campaign. We pretty much got, like, verbal commitment, like, they're with us. All right, close enough. But so we had, like, generally this awareness out in the community. So when these backroom conversations are going on with Elon, with xAI, it was like, first of all, don't y'all dare drill a well because community's gonna come after you. We're like, okay, thank you for saying that. Second was like, MLGW was like, we got the water, but what we really have been trying to do is get this water reuse facility off the ground. So going back to the map, right down here, this is xAI. So this is where their big facility is. This is where their cooling water system is. And so literally proximity-wise, like, you could not get better for this. And so what our leadership said at the time was like, hey, if you could help us get this orange thing is the water reuse facility. So they take the wastewater after it's been cleaned up, instead of sending it to the Mississippi, take about 10, 12 million gallons of that a day, clean it up a little bit more, and then they use that for cooling, and then TVA can also use that for cooling and steam generation. So it's like, okay, this is what we've been talking about. City of Memphis, we broke. We don't have $80 million for a facility. We don't want to advocate to increase water rates to do this either. So it's like equity is at the core of this. And so our leadership has said, hey, if you could, like, figure out how to help us do this, that'd be great. So when this plant was announced, you know, in June, it was like literally within days, our MLGW leadership said, hey, they're willing to help us create this water reuse facility. We're like, okay, yay, but like, well, I don't trust this at all, first of all. Let's get real. It's like, sounds great, but like, prove it.
Right.
And then it's also like, there's gonna be a lot of steps to make this a reality. And so that's like what we're currently in the throes of, is like, this is starting to become a reality. Like, they have taken steps and strides for xAI to own, build, and operate this facility that would be used for industrial cooling. And we had this crazy moment this month, what I have, February's been a thing.
Right. Still.
Hey, ho. I'm like,
Happy Black History Month.
woo, hey, baby. So we like talk about process and procedure. The city council, we got word that city council committee would be voting on a land sale to xAI for the land to build the facility. This is on like a Monday afternoon for a Tuesday morning committee meeting.
Literally.
And the agenda had been out since Friday. Like, what? And so finally it got added to the agenda, and like a little, it was like the deed agreement and like the survey or whatever was like added to the packet, but not the actual sale agreement, no like legal documentation of what we're talking about here. So we all go to these committee meetings. You can't speak at those. It's not like a city council meeting where you can go speak. So we go to the committee meeting and are just there in the room being like, we're watching you. And that was the first time anybody xAI actually came before city council ever. And city council tore them up.
Time out. So they've been here since June. That's when they announced. They actually was there since March.
Yeah.
Told us in June. And the first time they go to city council is almost a year later.
Yeah.
Like,
And for like a not even aspect related to the actual supercomputer operation. It's like this weird thing where it's like they got this audience now, but like there's no due process around the facility itself.
yes.
But city council got to take a couple punches. So that was,
That was good.
it was, it helped, I think, just in general, just getting a little of that out into the open. But luckily they voted for a delay on that vote. So it was like, okay, we got at least 2 weeks to figure this thing out. Like, what even the heck are we talking about right now? And so then we kind of like go on the legal side. Like, I don't know, real estate, legal, what? I don't know. But as advocates, you got to learn about stuff all the time. And so we're like, hey, how do we make this deal work for Memphis? You kind of heard about the previous tenants of this building. Like, Memphis does not understand the power that it has. Our leadership doesn't stand in that power. Let me rephrase. Our leadership doesn't stand in the power that it has. And so we get screwed over left and right. And so one of our big goals around this was like, this is supposed to be a super exciting thing we've been advocating for 8 years. Unfortunately, it's tied to this crazy person and this insane facility, but like, how do we do this right by Memphis? And so we learned about reversion clauses and right of first refusals and clawbacks and all this stuff, meaning that we can add some legal language to this agreement that says if you try to use this land for anything but a water recycling facility, the land automatically comes back to the city of Memphis. If you don't make almost near completion construction within 1 year, the land comes back to the city of Memphis for $1. If you are to ever leave town and don't want this facility anymore, you have to offer this to city of Memphis first. So we got these things, and we're trying to like learn and advocate and educate all at the same time.
In 2
over this
weeks.
2 week span.
I want to quickly add, Sarah, a part to that. So while, yes, conceptually, a water reuse facility like is good, when you mentioned that like this is still connected to someone that does not have anybody's best interest at heart,
That's right.
we still have community that's like, I don't care if this is a good thing.
Right.
I don't want this in community. And so for me, as an EJ activist, I still have to stand beside
That's
community.
right. That's right.
So it's a very precarious like balance between one, like, yes, like the water reuse facility like is good. This has been like advocacy for like over a decade to get that, but we still have to honor community and make it be known that community said no.
Right.
Period. It's like no ifs. It's not like, oh, like this one part is good. And so honestly, that's really tough.
It's been-
You know, for us in like the positions that we hold, the way that we engage with community, because if we truly want to operate through the 17 principles of environmental justice, the Hermes principles, we have to side with community. And so we have to try to strike balance while at the same time not trying to convince community
Yes.
that like this is good, because that's what's happening right now, right? That's what's happening with our leadership. Every time you put a camera in their face, they're saying like this is so good for community. And so in transparency, we're trying to navigate that,
Yeah.
like still honoring community saying, I don't care.
Yeah.
Absolute no.
Yeah.
So I want to put that part in there that kind of still
Yeah.
throws
Yeah.
a wrench
And-
in the
Yeah, the only thing I
situation.
was gonna add to that, like that's exactly where we're at, like literally at this current moment in time, like literally like right
Right
this
now.
moment, we're trying to figure out like how do we not go to bat for xAI? Like we're not here to be
No.
like, no, they're great,
Absolutely
we no. We're here to figure out how do we make this work for Memphis, make this work for Memphis right. And I was gonna point out, you see this sheet too, this community impact survey, the data report that we did. So in like, I think it was like October to December or something of last year, because there had been no community engagement. xAI is not doing it, City of Memphis isn't doing it, nobody's doing this. And so we kind
We
of,
had
as a coalition, we're
Literally.
like, let's just see what folks think. And so we can kind of dive into this later, but like, overall, there's support for the idea of a water reuse facility, yes. But overarchingly, concerns around transparency, lack of trust, huge concern about is this put long-term positive impacts. So this is a very weird situation we find us in, and it's been challenging to navigate, just to be totally frank. And that's where we are currently at the crux of that right now, where the water plant isn't a done deal either yet. Like there's a state permit they need to get. There's gonna be an agreement between the city and xAI. Like we're still in the throes of that, and so we're trying to like understand communities' concerns, needs, and how do we push this to make this deal work for Memphis. And it's tricky as hell. So.
Yeah. So I'll jump in here and just really affirm everything that folks have said. And so I was born and raised in 38109. Still live there. My parents got a house. My brother just bought a house out there, and so this isn't just like a sample size group, right? These are my neighbors. These are my aunts, my cousins, my aunties who are just my aunties, you know, that we go to church with, and they have real concerns. And so, question, just for everybody. Raise your hand if you feel like you 100% trust the government right now.
Oh, God.
Okay. So,
0% response rate. Got it.
Okay, write that down. So that's where we are also, right? And as black people in the United States of America, we have had more reasons, I would say, than anybody not to trust government.
Yeah.
And so when you see someone like Elon Musk, right, parading around Oval Office, and then you hear that there's another facility right? In addition to the facility that he snuck in. Now there's another facility that he's going to build in South Memphis that raises all types of alarms. And so part of doing the work, whether it is in a legal capacity or another capacity, is being able to translate and educate and inform people about what's happening in a way that also honors their experience. Because the truth is not just an emotional reaction. This is authentic truth that people have lived, right? I have buried both of my grandmothers, and I've buried my uncle, and they don't have a clue what to call the disease he died from, right? And these are all because of environmental racism, right? I lived that. That's why I'm here right in front of you today. And that's what we continue to fight for, is something that's more just than what exists. And so when you are at a moment where there is this intersectionality between something that could possibly long-term be good for the city, be good for operations and businesses, there is still a challenge, right? And that challenge presents an opportunity. And so a lot of times folks get exploitation without education. And that's what we see often, right? And I stole that from my brother, if he watches. And so what we have to do is we have to do the work to educate people and inform them in a way that still honors that experience, but also helps to move the conversation forward. One of the things that I tell people all the time, we are not against ethical progress. If it's ethical progress, all for it. But what we continue to see and what we see with this person is that they don't operate in an ethical way. And the other thing about that is they often use manipulation, and they use language as a manipulation tactic. They talk about sustainability, talk about electrification, talk about all of these different things. Yet, the facilities that you are building, and the facility in South Memphis, it runs on methane gas. It creates formaldehyde, it creates nitrogen oxide, it creates volatile organic compounds, PM2, it creates suffering, right? And we know these trap greenhouse gases, and it traps carbon in the air. Like that's not the truth, right? And so what we have to do is look at what options that we have. And so the last piece is centered around the legal aspect of this. And so from a legal aspect, it's like, who can help us, right? And like Latricia said, Shelby County Health Department, they could possibly help us. They have been delegated the authority to help us. Y'all, in 2023, we had to sue the Shelby County Health Department because they wouldn't help us. Like, we had to sue them because they wouldn't help us. And so what you also see, right, when you pay attention to these situations, is that imperialists change the dichotomy of power structures in a place. And so instead of the power being with the people and the elected officials, the power is in the hand of our Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce and these infiltrated folks like our Shelby County Health Department who practice non-acquiescence versus serving the people, right? This learned helplessness, like, we can't help you, we don't know what to do, we're going to send it to the EPA, versus, well, let me pause operations over here because there's a community health concern, right? And so it is also paying attention to how you can find the right people. And so for us, that's Southern Environmental Law Center, right? I ain't no look. Thank you, God.
They're supposed to be here.
Yes, and definitely want to shout out Amanda Garcia, the Southern Environmental Law Center. She wants to join us. She wants to be here, and so she does apologize that she can't make it, but definitely sends her regards. And so they have been instrumental in being there for us and helping to shape our strategy in a lot of different ways. And so one thing that they've done excellently was continue to review the permitting process. And so one of the permitting processes that needed to be reviewed was this permit that allowed 365 days of generator use without any qualms, right? You can use the generator 365 days, nobody can tell you anything. And so this $5 billion project in South Memphis with 18 generators, at least 2 turbines, is using a law that's meant for a person or a small business, but they're using this law to say that they are in compliance. And so what the SELC was able to do was take this back after they were like, yeah, they're fine. They were able to look at it again, because I looked at it and I was like, are they fine?
Yeah.
They might be fine. So SELC looked at it, and which is why you need partners in a coalition outside yourself, and fresh eyes. And so they were able to look at it and say, actually, no, this isn't right. They aren't in compliance. And then from there, we were able to challenge them, bring it to the EPA, and so it was able to be reviewed. And so 2 weeks ago, we learned that they did actually file a permit for the air monitors. Now, for the air generators. Now, we had a conversation and learned that their plan was to come off of the generators, and we're going to maybe use some generators in another place. And then after that, finding that out, they told us, then we turn on the news. Again, we're finding out on the news. Turn on the news, and they tell us they filed for a permit that will continuously keep these generators there. And so, like I said, this is a perpetual cycle, right? There is no changing or pivoting in their plans. It's only exploitation. And so that is what we continue to fight against, and that's what we're up against right now. And for us, we have a petition that I want y'all to sign. We're going to send it out to you. And we need as much support across the country. One of the things that helped us to beat the Byhalia Connection Pipeline was that we did have a whole lot of folks in Oregon sign a petition for a whole lot of people in Memphis. And that is what we have to do. It is a revolutionary act that is as simple as standing next to the person next to you who needs the most help. And that's what we need in this moment. But that's what we all are going to continue to need to find in these different environments. We are in a very closed, tight-knit space, right? You're in academia. Everybody's got their MacBooks and books and stuff like that. But there is somebody in this city who needs support. There's somebody in this state who needs help. And the way that we figure out how to be proximate to the people who need it the most is what's going to continue to change things. We can't continue to change things by helping the people that we know. We have to find folks that need the help from people they don't know. And that's how we have changed things in the past, and that's how people power really works. It is a multi-generational contract between people who were strangers, but we share the same air, we share the same sky, we share the same planet. And so I'm thankful for these folks. I'm thankful for y'all. And let's keep changing the world.
Yeah, no, so we have 35 minutes left, so let's just have you guys take questions from the audience.
All right.
And project when you ask.
I see this.
Hey, thank you. I just have a clarifying question. When you're talking about the generators, are these generators in the supercomputer data center that are powering the computers? Is this a different, where are these located? Can you just help me,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if I could just draw in the air, everybody use imagination. Sesame Street. Sesame Street. Okay. So the xAI facility is here, right? The generators are here on the outside of that building, and they power two things. So they power these mega packs, right? And then the mega packs send the energy at a balanced rate to the computers. And so one of the things we were told was that it's taking so much time for us to figure out the energy balance. And so we just need to keep polluting the air. And that just makes no sense at all to me. Because if you are talented enough to figure out how to build this process, you should also be equally as talented to figure this out without pollution.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Solar energy and battery storage,
I know.
it's not a new concept.
No.
Right.
And it just needs some more backing.
Yeah.
And it looks like he got a couple dollars. But
Yeah, and they're mounted on like a tractor trailer beds. So they're usually driven to like a construction site where you might need it for a little bit, and that's why you don't have that permit requirement. And it was our chamber that helped xAI understand that loophole, and it was our chamber that said, "Oh, line them up, baby, burn that gas."
Yeah.
You got 364 days to do it until you kicks in a permit,
yeah, I saw you.
and there are
you,
18 of them right
and
now.
then- Okay, boom.
Okay, excuse my ignorance about Memphis, but
That's all right.
why is it the water for cooling the facility doesn't come from the Mississippi?
Happy to take that one. So, money? There you go, I'm done. No, so the aquifer is literally like everywhere below us, and it's very cheap. Our water rates, they pride themselves on being the cheapest in the country. And the more water you use, on a commercial water rate structure, the more water you use per gallon, the cheaper it gets per gallon. So the highest water users pay half what we residents pay.
I know if I use more.
No. So the Mississippi River, is very proximate to the very west side of town. The river levels fluctuate a lot. It's a really, sediment-laden, dirty source. So it is a lot more expensive to like clean up and use. But we don't think that that's a barrier for certain industries in proximity. When you're on the banks of the Mississippi and you're needing this for a non-potable source, then just treat the dang water and use it. And so that's a huge, it's just not, Memphis is just very much used to having this water source, and industry has very much expected cheap, pure water. I don't need to deal with treatment costs. I don't need to deal with efficiency costs. I can let it leak in single use and whatever because it's pure and cheap. Why not? And so it's like this culture shift around valuing water. And one thing I'll add just on the culture thing is like our aquifer is underground, out of sight, out of mind. It's like you can't see it. You know it's good. It's down there. What we have done to the surface water in Memphis, Tennessee, and West Tennessee is horrible. I mean, we are all, every single river in Memphis is on the EPA 303D list, meaning that it is an legally impaired waterway, and you should, there are warnings that say do not eat the fish. There are no bodies of water that are not just like little man-made lakes that you can eat the fish out of in Memphis, Tennessee. So there's a huge disconnect in like what we do to the land and water affecting our good, amazing aquifer. And there is a connection, it's just slow. And that point in time, that 80 years of dumping and burying nasty crap, we're hitting that point in time where we're starting to see drinking water wells impacted with pollution, and we know there's a lot more coming if we don't intervene. So this whole culture of like what we do to the land doesn't really matter because it's good down here is a huge part of shifting like the value of water in Memphis, and it's part of the ongoing thing, and this has been something that helps continue to raise that, but it's going to come down to money and people really pushing industry to pay their fair share.
That's right.
And the aquifer is always at a constant temperature, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the river is not.
Correct.
That's right.
Mhm.
I saw you.
Yeah, two questions.
Okay.
So the first one is like when communities like challenging health department or failing to help the community, did they use the administrative law like argument that failing to exercise discretion is an abuse of like discretion by the health authority? Was that in play?
So instead of using that, their argument was that their bylaws didn't give them the express authority. And so because they didn't have the express authority to do that, because the laws were being followed based on their permit, then they didn't have the authority to make that change.
And the other one was, is there any, is it possible, or are there any efforts to better regulate AI to reduce its water footprint?
So, regulation-wise, that's something that we're still trying to learn. I will say that my background is business administration and information technology system. Anybody in here code or have coded before? It's just me in here?
A few, couple.
Okay, yeah, look at my people in here. So what I know is that it takes a lot of resources, right, based on the algorithms that you write, the code that you choose. And the other part to that is the facilities for AI and data centers also should have stipulations based around energy consumption, water consumption, where they save energy and operate at a different rate because of the type of business that it is. And so, like, if you know blockchain, like just doing a different algorithm can literally change how much energy is being used. And so I think with AI technology, it is a very, at an infant stage. And so as it continues to matriculate, the data sets, the formulas will change and hopefully become more energy efficient. But right now, because they are using such large language models and the specific algorithms that they are using, it is going to be continuously, very energy consumption. And with that much energy consumption, you got to cool these computers. The other thing that we didn't mention is that this facility is at currently 100,000 GPUs, graphic processing units, right? In order to do this large language model. They want to 10x that. So they want to go from 100,000 to 1 million.
1 million. It's like, what? Like, where did you get that?
Like,
But tell them about the tweet for the 300,000. That was the Elon.
which
tweet.
one?
The Elon tweet for the first expansion. What did I say?
Yeah,
Like,
go.
so they had so 100,000 was the original announcement, and I
was a
think it
lot.
was like October or something. Anyway, Elon tweeted, it was like, we're going to 300,000 GPU, yeah, and everyone in Memphis, and even our MLGW chain, everyone was like,
okay.
you what?
Right.
Like we
Right.
usually learn from a tweet.
Yeah,
Right.
and then everyone's like, well, it's a tweet, and everyone's like, no, he's gonna follow through with that. And then it was like his whole team scrambling to now 2x the facility, and then they want 300 megawatts
Yeah.
of power, and now they're gonna need 2.2 million gallons of water, and it's like that was just a thing because it's like, oh, we've got more floor space in the warehouse, we might as well. And now we're at the 1 million thing that happened. That announcement came in December from a chamber luncheon. I don't think our mayor or MLGW leadership knew.
Was even
Yeah,
involved.
they
I
didn't
don't
know.
even think they knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing that I want to add to that is, so one of the biggest things that we were asking for that should have happened, but I'm just going to take it from there. But there was not an environmental risk assessment, and there's a big focus on feasibility. So that was an excellent question to ask about conservation. And best case scenario, before you even went into production, there should have been, beyond just feasibility, there should have been consideration about conservation. There should have been consideration around environmental risk, and that just didn't happen. Another part of that we didn't bring up in a conversation earlier is about a health risk assessment.
That's right.
So bringing back in, I want to drag the health department
Come
back
on.
into this too, is like, that's important. Like, do your job. You have a bad history and a bad track record of not doing your job. You literally use taxpayer dollars where you're supposed to be protecting the well-being of this community, and it's completely absent of that. And so because they don't show up, so it leans into, we're at an MLGW meeting and we're like, the health department needs to be here. What about a health risk assessment? Memphis Light, Gas, and Water is like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, like, sounds like a
that's-
great idea.
like, right. They're like, we agree, but like, we
Right.
can't do it.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to bring that part into the conversation as well,
Yeah.
where typically, like, there would be a pilot. Right? So before you would go to scale, like, you literally would go through this whole like pre-assessment process to assess not just readiness but risk. Literally none of that happened. So you're learning about expansions at a bougie, chamber, luncheon.
$300 a plate. I
Right,
wanted to
like
go,
what?
and I was like, nah, never
In
mind.
Memphis, we're poor. Like, we can't afford that.
Can't-
So like, there's no.
Don't let this food food.
You're building a plane, and doing it at the same time, and there's like no real like oversight, but then it's also like the fear of the unknown
Yeah.
because it literally has not been done before, so you can't even really predict what may occur, whether it be with water, whether it be like with air. It's just kind of, we're just learning along the way, unfortunately.
I don't even remember. I remember Danny and then here at the top.
Yeah, one of the most, I guess, astounding things about this fight for me is it's not surprising that a chamber of commerce or like even an investor-owned utility would kind of, for lack of a
This
better
is
word,
city-owned
shield for a
utility.
company.
Yeah.
City-owned
It's-
Like
yeah,
utility.
it's
XAI,
public.
yeah, Memphis Light Gas and Water is a public utility that's supposed to be serving the public and be accountable to the public. So my question is, what are they saying is the public benefit from this? And then also, it seems like the community's number one priority for public benefit is local jobs and training opportunities. So what kinds of local jobs and training opportunities
Yeah.
are you seeing
yeah.
in Memphis currently?
Yeah, I can take the first
boy.
one if you
Yeah,
want
I think so.
Yeah, first one, I think that MLGW is first kind of came out it with the chamber's, statement of like, it's jobs. We're gonna bring jobs. That it was 300 jobs. It's like, where, what? Like janitor? What are we talking about here? So literally, we're seeing like somewhere in the 40 to 70 range.
Right.
And a lot of those are going to be folks coming in from Silicon Valley, and then the majority of that 300 is remote. They're not in Memphis. They're not recruiting locally. So that was one of the first things that our utility said public benefit-wise. But then otherwise, I mean, there wasn't really like an express, like, here's the benefit. I mean, it's just been like, we should be excited they want us.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not.
No.
So it's been really disappointing. I mean, the only credit I give to the utility has really been they've been the only publicly facing entity in this whole thing since day one. And I mean, they have put themselves out there in a really public way and answering stuff that is not within their purview. But I think that we're kind of getting the feel that like the initial, 100,000 GPU initial whatever, they were excited about, and now I think they're feeling very taken advantage of, and like, oh my God, we made a deal with the devil, and it's like, yadoy. But anyway, but that's where we're at right now. So, yeah.
And so I'll just elaborate on that just a little bit more, and saying exploitation is a culture. So they started by saying, we just need the 150 megawatts of power. So they reached out to Tennessee Valley Authority, right? And the Tennessee Valley Authority was like, well, we can't refuse them. So here you go. And I'm not
With
even
no
gonna get
assessment done.
right.
With
No assessment, no anything. It was just like, oh well, they could have it. And again, this is very unique to a specific individual who's just running through things. And so that happened. And now they decided, okay, now I need 10 times that amount of power. And I'm going to need that, and I'm going to build it myself, which is why they created a new permit. And one of the reasons that they said they couldn't do it was because Memphis Light Gas and Water can't provide them the power. And now Memphis Light Gas and Water is like, well, we never said that. We said we could do that if you wanted. And so now this conversation with a billionaire that happened without any citizen influence, without any elected influence, has come back. And these same people who brought him here are now being used. And so that's, again, the culture of exploitation. And then about jobs and the benefits. I think it was communicated to us, again, about the 300 jobs and that it would be good for Memphis. But one of the things that frustrates me is that one of the benefits that they told us was that they were going to pay their property taxes.
Oh yeah, tax
And so
revenue.
We're not
That's the
asking
real
for
benefit.
And so-
tax cuts or tax
so-
incentives.
I
No, that was the benefit. No.
I struggle to understand that somebody paying their bills would be a benefit. And then at the same time, there was no clear definition of how those tax benefits would reach our community, right? In no significant way would it was going to improve our lives or improve the standard of living or the health of our community from those quote-unquote property taxes. And so it's a complete failure from my perspective to find a benefit that is actually truly there for the city of Memphis and especially for our community.
There was somebody
it
right
was,
here.
I thought up here in the corner. I saw you. What's up?
I mean, my question is pretty similar. First off, I can tell y'all are friends because I'm cracking me up. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have a question that they basically assumed the old space and now they're trying to build something else, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and you also just answered one of my other questions. Okay, they are gonna pay their property taxes, so like, is the incentive for their company to just come in, cheap water, cheap land, and they can occupy, like, and then what is, on the flip side, the benefit for the community if there's not jobs? A lot of those AI data centers, they need one dude running them per shift.
Right.
I mean, if there are jobs, they'll probably be in gas plants, right? And again, or, you know, contract electricians building stuff, and then that goes away after it's built, so, and the chamber luncheons, I'm not totally privy to what's all going on.
We're not either.
We are either, apparently, geez.
So I don't know,
Yeah.
who's getting the paycheck for them?
Yeah.
Who's
Well,
taking?
And I guess we got that for a second. One thing you can tell there's a lot going on right now. Like one thing we neglected to mention is 522
22
acres.
Yeah.
So Keyshawn like tried to do this whole alley-oop thing to stop this, but the way that Memphis is like set up is it's a very much it's recruitment by the chamber, by TVA, by MLGW. They've been working as a little group for like decades, and they go find businesses. And they're very much like, oh, here's the tax breaks you should apply for. Don't worry, we'll rubber stamp everything. You know, here like they make it as easy as possible, and that's kind of how it's been done. I mean, since as long as I can understand. And so this whole like Elon xAI thing really is the norm. And I think it's been, people think, oh, this is so backroom, this is so fast. And it's like, yeah, it is, but like it's always been like this. And so I think it's been good that you have this big name tied to it because people are like really waking up to that. And so that's been like a weird benefit of it in a weird way where it's like, let's elevate this because this practice needs to stop.
That's right.
And so like the property tax thing is like, almost every single industry gets a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes.
That's right.
And it has reduced our tax base horribly. And so Memphis is a town where like the burden of everything financial is on the residents. Our sales tax, 9.75%. And they keep trying to add more to do a little thing here, and it's like, stop with the sales tax. What? But that's going to put the burden on the poor people. And so that's just like our economic structure is structured like that right now. So we're like in environmental groups and we're hacking at the big stuff right now. But like this 500-acre deal, where this is all built is in this industrial park, and there's a bunch of land right around where this facility is. From our understanding, Elon xAI wanted this facility because it was a relatively new building. It was the size they needed. It had 0 permit requirements. It was going to be easy. And our chamber, TVA, MLGW moved quick to make sure they got everything they asked for. And he was like, ooh, okay,
Puppets.
perfect, love those kind. So that's from our understanding, like really the why. I mean, the cheap land, the cheap water is part of it too, but like that's the why. And then we find out about this 500-acre thing. Keeping over you.
Yeah. So I think somebody just like emailed me and was like, "Hey, do you know they're selling the land to it?" And I was just like, "What land? They already bought the property and the land." And they were like, "No, the Edge Board, which is our economic development growth engine, and these people are supposed to spur growth in the city of Memphis, but they just give tax breaks to companies, and that is proven." That it doesn't spur growth in any way. And so, if anything, it makes corporations entitled. And so when a corporation does just pay their bills, it's supposed to be a benefit to the city of Memphis.
Yeah.
And so that is a whole, we can talk for hours about that. But what I will illuminate here, though, is that our Edge Board called a special session, right, on a Friday to hand over 522 acres of land. Now, this land neighbors a community called Boxtown. Boxtown is called Boxtown because the freedmen community, which means these were slaves who had worked and become free people or negotiated freedom, and they came together in a spot, very beautiful place. It's so beautiful, there's a natural state park that's neighboring it as well. And so they found this place, and then they found it was connected to like the railways, so folks, they could travel back and forth. And they used the broken wood right, off of boxcars that used to travel and that they discarded. They used that wood to build their homes. They literally built a community out of nothing, out of the scraps of other corporations. They used that to build a community and families where families could grow, could learn, and prosper. And so right next to this community is a big field, a lot of land that separates the community from the pollution. Not adequately, right? Because it's only about some acres, which
It's like
adds
less than 2 miles.
less than 2 miles,
Yeah.
right? And so the pollution doesn't know any bounds. and so now this land that is connected to where we build community as free people in Memphis is now under the ownership of one of the most racist, xenophobic, like evil people on the planet, because a group of people decided in a special session, without any community input, without anybody in the community knowing about it, they decided that it was fit to give him 522, those specific 522 acres. Again, and this
And
is
what are they doing with it, Keyshawn?
right. What are they? And the question was, after the sale, after they agreed to sell it, the question from one of the board members was, so do you all have plans for the
See
property?
what I'm talking about?
And he literally said no. He said,
Concepts of a plan.
and so to this day, we have no idea what they're going to do with 522 acres. And it is literally one of the most mind-boggling things, because I've never seen somebody sell property, in, especially not of that magnitude,
No.
without providing some type of plan or some kind of blueprint. They just, with a question mark, sold it. And then on top of that, gave them a year's worth of rent for free. I could use a rent. I could use that.
Right, that part.
But yeah, to answer your question, that's where that ended up. So I'm gonna go here, and then I think you popped up, and then my man in the purple. So, okay, go.
Thanks. I really appreciate the presentation, especially as a community organizer. This is so familiar and so maddening. My specific questions, I work for my county Department of Environmental Quality, so all your talk about the air permits, we are the air agency. So I'm like, is this a Title V source? Do you know that? Are these operating under emergency generator permits? Does this go to Tennessee DEP, or is it going to, like, do you know who
Shelby
the-
County.
So
Shelby.
it is
local.
Shelby County
Yeah.
has an air quality agency?
Yeah, so they
And
get,
they're-
yeah, they have like like we've got this like contract county system where it's the state regulator
Yeah,
TDEC,
they
and
have-
then they have regulatory permitting authority
Right.
by county, and so we
They
get
have
this
that
certificate
authority.
exemption, so it's all under our county, and they do that same thing with groundwater, and it's all under like 5 layers of bureaucracy in the health department.
Very.
So more questions about the air permit then. So, does Shelby County DEQ or DEP or Air Quality Department, whatever, not have like a public participation process? We have to, I mean, we just had to redo ours.
They
Did I
do.
just bring this up?
Yeah, they do. They do not.
They do not.
We actually suggested it to them.
I don't even.
We demanded
I
it
know. Like
a
demanded
year
it.
ago.
This one qualifies to be requested at public meeting.
That's right.
So this one is not like mandatory requirement, it's like, you're allowed to ask for one.
And then, okay, this looks like a cumulative impact nightmare.
100%.
Do you all know, is your air quality area, is it in non-attainment for any criteria pollutants or HAPs?
It is in non-attainment for ozone.
Okay.
100%.
and Just ozone?
That's as
Well,
far as
because
we
we
know.
don't
That's
have
that
enough
we know of.
data. We-
Okay, so here's another.
you
Yeah,
want-
so here's another one, right? There are air monitors, EPA regulated air monitors, EPA standard, in the suburbs, right? And what is that? Shelby Farms,
Yep,
and we have
Fraser.
one in Fraser, right?
13 miles away
Which is
from
in
South
North Memphis. North
If-
Memphis.
on that map, does it show how many facilities?
No, you can't see President's Island.
Okay, so what's not on the map, but present, very much so present, is over 30 petrochemical or toxic release facilities, right? They're right encircling in South Memphis in a toxic donut. And there is not a single air monitor
0.
in South Memphis, and hasn't been for at least a decade.
Y'all know about purple air monitors?
We do, and Kimberly Davis, Christine, they literally have a project where we're working with community members so we can get our own data. So,
Yay! Fill in the data gap.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to you all and being very impressed by how together you are and how you're working in this crisis situation together. But I have I'm not a lawyer, unlike a lot of people here, I'm law student.
We're not either.
But I also think legally because I do legal force defense. So I'm wondering a couple things that might be useful. One is, you talk about the boxcar community. There's
Boxtown.
What?
Boxtown.
Boxtown. And that should be historical site preservation for Black
100%.
history. And that's something to push with like national historical sites. There's a big move now for reparations
That's good.
and things like that with land. Like you should look into some of the research that's been done for the people who should get reparations from that land, from slavery. That's one. And then the other one that strikes me that you probably thought about, but I didn't hear it explicitly, I was a little late, but how does the municipal authority continue to provide enough electricity for the city residents they serve when there's this much electricity demand way beyond what they've been doing? So that seems like it'd be a violation of the municipal charter or city policies. So there's that angle too. Yeah.
So to answer the first part, the Black Historical Site, so there is a church in Boxtown called White's Chapel, and we have applied to have them added to the registry. The entire area, we have not, so we will pursue
I like
that.
that.
So
I like
thank
that
you,
idea.
thank you. I came to Oregon just to find that out.
Yeah,
Go Oregon.
So thank
yeah,
you.
we'll take any ideas, by the way.
Yes,
like,
yes, please, y'all.
We're like in the throes
I see you,
of
my
this.
friend. And then on the
Municipal authority
Yes.
for providing electricity to residents.
The only stipulation is that that MLGW has to do the necessary impact studies, and they are working with xAI on developing a substation in order to facilitate the power transfer. And so that is something they are trying to follow.
And that's for the expansion. So that 300 megawatts and beyond, that's where they haven't officially been granted that, hence why they're cranking up the gas turbines.
Right.
And so that is where there's a little bit of a local say in providing that additional power. So there isn't a say on that yet. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I had here, and then my man in the back.
Yeah, I'm just really grateful you guys are here. We're from Minneapolis, so I feel connected. And also, I mean, it's also gratifying to hear about the power company and the chamber doing the same thing, because we get that, the same thing, we are. But my question's really about this. Like, how did you do this?
Yay!
Like, do they try to discredit this in some way, saying that it's not real?
Actually, no.
No, they look surprised. And our mayor, like, just been toting it around, actually.
The Memphis Business Journal put a couple little blips in there. I'm like, oh.
That's great.
Yeah, we put together like a Google survey form, and we like kind of pulled questions and ideas that we had already been like organizing around, and then just like what are some of the like concerns we'd already heard on Facebook and in comment sections, put that into the form, shared that with our networks, and then we decided to do like a Facebook ad and targeted like 38109. The MCAG did some canvassing.
Too.
So we were really trying to make sure that 38109 had a like over-representational response to that. And so we ended up with like 350 responses within the data report with Tracy at.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it plain, so that you can clearly understand, since like community had been completely left out of the conversation, like it's very clear, like of course it's just a sample,
Right.
but to make it very like impactful around what community is saying, since they have been left out of the process.
Yeah, and a lot of that was the fact that a lot of times we're gonna hear, well, where's the data? Like, what are people actually like? Why would we just believe you? You know, so that also kind of birthed this product, and Latricia made it look phenomenal.
I know.
Thank you.
Back.
So, you mentioned that they're drawing the water from the aquifer. Are they discharging?
No, most of this is lost through evaporation. So it gets that hot point and it's lost, so it's like gone from our
So
system.
that's why they need to keep extracting.
Correct. So they do have it on like a
Closed
chiller
loop.
circular system, but once it reaches a certain temperature, it's gone into the air.
Yeah, I was wondering if the discharge point became a point of advocacy for.
And one of the weird things, again, it's like the waters thing is like quantity is the concern. And so it's been like, again, I'm like the water is like a silver lining in this whole thing where like there isn't really a water quality impact with the data center because it's really for cooling. There's no process. It's not touching any, chemical composition thing. So like the quality side of stuff is more on the air pollution side. And so it's been like, how do we kind of connect the dots on like the overall environmental impacts of this facility and then also piecing out like solutions for them. But yeah, so that's what
If
it's.
there's any discharge at all, they would need a point source discharge.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they don't have.
And they'd be discharging into the 303D water.
Into Mississippi, yeah. The TVA has an MPDS permit and they do some discharge, but they also, the majority of their water is also lost through evaporation. So these are like, the water's gone from our system, but we do have some discharge permits, but xAI doesn't have one.
But if you did want to find the quality threat, is the fact that where they're pumping from at the Davis well field is contributing to the
Sucking down
right.
of the
It's-
arsenic and.
The way I do it, Sarah taught me this. So like, this is just physics, right? So if they're pumping the water out, the groundwater contamination is just going to move down to the water, and so that is a threat. That's an imminent threat.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why we want them to come off of using the water.
And that's the connection of
And the
like
pipe.
between quality and quantity. It's like,
That's right.
and that's never been a concept in Memphis. So we're trying to like make that connection, like conserving equals preserving our good clean water. And that's like a new thing. And we have zero regulations, zero management plans, zero anything to do that. So we're in that like education moment.
Yeah, back here. There you go.
Yeah, so you talked about the Memphis government just giving away these permits, right, for xAI, and you were saying that's just a culture, right? I just wondered about the fiscal benefit, like obviously they're selling the land, right? Are they making money off of that?
For the water plant, well, we can talk about water plant specifically. They did get fair market value.
Yeah.
That's a win, okay, y'all. We usually don't. We're like, oh, $1, sure, take it. So we did get fair market value on that, and they didn't take for any like tax incentives or anything like that. So they are paying, in theory, their fair share. The weird thing about that is like they keep talking about this property tax and how amazing, and this is $5 billion, and the water plant's going to be 80. There's going to be so much property tax. These entities have yet to tell us how much property tax. Like, what is the number? And all the news articles have been like, estimates between, consideration of, and it's like, show us the money.
Right, give us a hard number.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say the 522 acres, it is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2.5 million a year for 20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, so do you feel like, I always hear AI is the future, like we're gonna be stuck using this regardless, like there's no path forward. Do you feel like you're gonna be constantly like cleaning this mess up? Or do you feel like there's gonna be more plans, AI plans, or supercomputers?
So let me just hop in right here because being at the intersectionality of being a technologist and futurist and also an environmentalist is a very unique place. What I understand is that the way we solve problems historically has required the use of technology in a lot of different forms. What we also have done is outpace human nature, right, and human development with these processes. And so what I believe is necessary is collectively to decide to slow down. And a decision to slow down doesn't mean that innovation is inept or we don't innovate, right? It just means we take the time necessary for people and communities and our planet to to find this equanimity that is now missing. What I do believe that in a capitalistic society that continues to thrive off the breaking of people's spirits, bodies, time, and financially, is that in the short term, we will continue to see this exploitation. We will continue to see data centers. We got 3 new data centers in Memphis since this announcement. He's also brought his friends, the Anon and Solaris supply xAI, and they've now got Memphis addresses. And so what you see is this imperialist effort, right, to colonize an area and to use it for this new techno space and to build out for the technocracy, right, to continue to operate. And then they raise up oligarchs like the Memphis Chamber of Commerce, the Edge Board, right? These are financially well-off people who are making decisions for the whole. The whole is poor, right? The average is less than $40,000 a year per household. And 38109 is less than 25,000, right? In 2025. And so I do believe we will continue to see that type of idea and that type of exploitation, but that is where people power comes in, is because as community members, as family, like, we have to continue to stand together, and we have to use the skills and rely on the folks who have the specific talents to help build in those barriers that do slow us down. And we have to elect officials and people who do believe in that. It is not inevitable for our planet and for our world to suffer under a technocracy regime. That's not an inevitability. That is what we've allowed to happen so far. That doesn't mean it has to continue. And that's where I see the greatest hope. That's where I get up every day and I continue to fight for, is because just because it is what it appears to be now, we still have the ability to imagine something different. And we have the responsibility to imagine something different. Right now, we do live in this dystopia that Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos cooked up some years ago. But we still have the opportunity right here, right now, to collectively imagine something that looks different. Right?
Today's National Blackout Day,
That's
whatever.
it.
It's like vote with your dollar, like
That's it.
local only, and don't use Grok. Don't subscribe to Grok, y'all. From Memphis, please don't use Grok. Okay?
Please. But
That's the chat bot that the xAI is helping. Yeah.
so xAI, well, we should have started with that. So the xAI facility and its computers are used to do large language model data training for the Grok processor. And so it is what he touts as like the greatest AI technology, the most nascent. And so in order for that to happen, he has to continue to build it out and continue to use so many things. But if you follow AI, then you know about, I think it's DeepSeek, that, like I said, there are ways to do this in a more succinct way that requires a lot less energy, a lot less infrastructure. And we can continue to move that way. And like I said, it does require us changing our relationship to convenience. It is extremely convenient, right, to pull up ChatGPT and be like, look, give me
And Amazon.
20 data points to do X, Y, and Z. And it is extremely convenient, but our relationship to convenience has to change in order that we can reshape and reimagine how we exist and live in this world.